All right, welcome to the January 28th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. We're glad to be here at the Wakanda Club with those of you here in person and those of out there watching in cyberspace or later on YouTube. Again, we thank Invictus Media for filming our meeting today. They do a fantastic job. I'm not wearing my mask while at the microphone, so you can hear me more clearly, and I'm also safely distanced from all of you. We will be sanitizing the microphone between speakers, as we always do. We do ask that you keep your masks on when not eating or drinking or speaking from the podium. Now, I ask you all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the four-way test. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and beautiful? Now everyone wave at each other. Our members are the lifeblood of our Rotary Club. Hopefully you know how much we value each and every one of our existing members. As you know, it's essential that we attract new members to our club. Recently, we've had an average net loss of 16 members per year. This is typical for large Rotary clubs around the country, but underscores the need to drive growth in our clubs. As part of that effort, we're excited to announce a new initiative designed to attract new members. The Rotary Club of Des Moines will waive its $285 initiation fee, and new members will pay dues of 50% for the first 4 quarters after the club resumes in-person meetings, and will receive a 25% discount for their second 4 quarters of membership in our club. This new member dues initiative will be effective immediately. The Board of Directors unanimously approved the proposed development by a subcommittee of Membership Development Committee and Board of Directors members. The new members dues initiative has no negative impact to existing members and will only help to strengthen our club from a social and financial standpoint as we attract members to grow our club. Indeed, this initiative supports our 4-way test. It is fair and beneficial to all concerned. We will share this information. The Communications Committee is created to help you spread the word and help grow our membership. Oh, hello.
Hi. Today's speaker involves a controversial topic. As president, would you tell us how you feel about whiskey?
Wow. We had a Rotary member that I'm vaguely acquainted with that in his own words asked a question and said that we have a controversial topic today and wanted to know my feelings on whiskey. Well, my friends, I had not intended to discuss this controversial subject at this particular time. However, I want you to know that I do not shun controversy. On the contrary, I will stand on any issue at any time, regardless of how fraught with controversy it may be. You've asked me how I feel about whiskey. All right, here is how I feel about whiskey. If when you say whiskey, you mean the devil's brew, the passion poison, the bloody monster that defiles innocence, dethrones reason, destroys the home, creates misery and poverty, literally takes the bread from the mouths of little children. If you mean the evil drink that topples Christian man and woman from the principles of righteous and gracious living into the bottomless pit of degradation and despair and shame and helplessness and hopelessness, then certainly I am against it. But if you say whiskey, you mean by the oil of conversation, the philosophic wine, the ale that is consumed when good fellows get together, that puts a song in their heart and laughter on their lips, and the warm glow of contentment in their eyes, if you mean Christmas cheer, if you mean the stimulating drink that puts the spring in the old gentleman's step on a frosty, crisp morning, if you mean the drink which enables a man to magnify his joy and his happiness and to forget, if only for a little while, life's great tragedies, heartache, and sorrows. If you mean the drink, the sale of which pours into our treasuries untold millions of dollars, which are used to provide tender care for our little crippled children, our blind, our deaf, our dumb, our pitiful aged and infirmed, to build highways and hospitals and schools, then certainly I am for it. That is my stand. I will not retreat from it. I will not compromise. That's how I feel about whiskey. Actually, I have a big interest in today's topic, as my wife and I are partners and founders in a wine importing and distribution company, University Distributors. I've learned so much about wine since being in the business that I can actually tell the difference between a red and a white wine just by looking at it. So when you're making your wine selection, look for the University Distributors sticker on the bottle. I'm sure Katie's not going to remember this if I say I'll make a $25 contribution to the foundation for my shameless plug here.
I'll remember.
We have several people in the audience saying they're going to remember that. So with that, I will have Randy Worth come up and introduce our keynote speaker. Randy.
Thank you, President Doug. I too am not wearing my mask, and I apologize to those of you that wish I were. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you Steve Larson, Administrator of the Iowa Alcoholic Beverages Division, and his right-hand person, Brenda, who probably does all the work, and Steve takes all the credit. I don't know. Mr. Larson is a graduate of William Penn University, graduating with honors with a degree in business administration. He started his public service to the state of Iowa in 1984, serving in various roles in the state treasurer's office, last acting there as Deputy of Governmental Relations and Public Policy. In 2010, he was appointed by the governor to his first four-year term as administrator of the Alcoholic Beverage Division, and is now has been appointed in his third appointment. In 2018, Mr. Larson released a study on the Iowa Tide House Law, which basically laws that govern the three-tiered relationship between manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. This study is a resource for the Iowa legislature as they study the effectiveness of these laws. In 2019, he released a report to Governor Reynolds and to the Iowa General Assembly on the potential licensing reform. And also in 2018, the division completed its process of outsourcing final deliveries to Rowan Transport. Mr. Larson resides in Polk City with his wife Jane and their two sons. Please welcome Stephen Larson.
It's great to be here. As Doug said, in his arena, it's a very dynamic area and a lot of change. First of all, I want to say hello to everyone. I'm going to start out by saying that I would assume that over 50% of you consume a beer or a wine or a spirit in a socially and responsible way in regards to that consumption. Of course, there are always times during celebrations of weddings and other great events, St. Patty's Day. Also, I'm an avid golfer, and I'm sure when I play, I might have a couple extra Budweisers during my time. In addition to that, in this arena, many of you will consume seltzers that are made by beer manufacturers, wine, beer, canned cocktails. Some people like spirits straight. Some people like of course, wine is always straight. But in this world, over the last 8 to 9 years, there's been a very much of a combination of injecting into alcoholic beverages, especially beer and spirits, flavors, sweetness. So as a part of that, as some of you also like to have cocktails with a spirit, which will incorporate various mixers. However, all of you will benefit by the taxation of these beverages. As the regulatory authority under Chapter 123, Iowa's Alcoholic Beverages Division, we also are engaged in licensing. So anyone who is in manufacturing, wholesaling, retailing, special events, RAGBRAI who wants to sell beer, we are engaged in the permit process, in the licensing process with local authorities, as well as licensees. Some of you also may be in the business, such as Doug, in the Alcoholic Beverages Division, either directly or indirectly because you could be engaged in your relationships in supplying goods and services in regards to various vessels that these things may contain, as well as various ingredients. Because clearly in our state, under Governor Branstad's leadership back in 2009, they created the native distillery industry, and in Iowa we now have 15 native distilleries, Templeton Rye, and also Cedar Ridge, and so in LeClaire as well with Mississippi Distilling. So it's a growing industry. In addition to that, Iowa wineries have been engaged in this business for almost 15 to 20 years. In addition to that, other things that are happening regarding new license types, there weren't brew pubs 15 years ago that you see as far as the frequency of brew pubs. So with that, before I get into some facts and figures, I would also like to thank at this time Randy Worth for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity to spend a few minutes talking about what we do and how we're engaged in commerce. What is our partnership in regards to the regulation and governing of alcoholic beverages? And also, how do we conduct our business? Because we are also a business. Back in the day, back in 1934, but moving forward under Governor Branstad's leadership in the Iowa legislature back in 85 or 86, they changed the controlled state model. And the reason that we're a controlled state model is because we touch in the supply chain hard liquor from both the manufacturer, but when it becomes into the wholesale tier, there was a retail tier, which was Iowa's liquor stores. So back in 1985 or 86, Governor Branstad and leaders of the legislature changed our controlled model so that we are the sole wholesaler of spirits to all of the retailers across this state. Back in that time, you were talking 354 licensees. We're now at 1,850 licensees that we deliver hard liquor to across this state, all 99 counties and thousands of cities. So I'll connect that because we are both a regulator. In addition to that, we run a business. And the profits that we make from the sell as wholesaling of spirits is very material, like $133 million in a state of about 3.3 million people. When I walked in and had the opportunity to lead this department, we had about 620 Class E's, and now you can see the growth over the last decade. But also, as Doug notes, And when we talk about spirits, we also talk about the variety of spirits, the diversity. In 2010, there was just black velvet. 5 years later, we have black velvet caramel. We have black velvet this. We have black velvet that. We have 175s to a little black velvet. So just think about Pearl vodka. We have Smirnoff that's in 25 different flavors. So consumers gravitated toward flavors. So over the last 10 years, under our department, the business has to be able to adapt, also to be able to pivot. But also on the regulatory side, in the licensing side, we grew thousands of licenses from special permits, which is like a 5-day festival. If you would have rode Ragbri 25 years ago, you would have saw very few beer tents. You take Ragbri now, and there are hundreds of special events, special permits, to allow people to what? Make money off of the retail tier to help local communities, charities, and such. So besides having the opportunity to regulate, to license, we also are running a business. In addition to this, I also want to thank Brenda Emilio for working with Randy to assist me in this presentation this afternoon, and I want to be sure that I allow enough time. So we show you what is called our annual report. This is online, but the facility in Ankeny is over 200,000 square feet. We had to add 30,000 square feet over the last 3 to 4 years to meet the needs of Iowa consumers and what the grocery stores were demanding in variety. In addition to that, we are also been out in Ankeny since about 1985 or 84, and during that time on Holsizer, which is just north of the Olive Garden, because everybody asks where's Holsizer, there's a number of warehouses, but we are an active participant, and the facility in itself is a state asset owned by the taxpayers of this state. So when I came in, I ensured that we have a return on investment, both in space allocation and also to ensure that we can have operations that can meet the needs of our retailers. And so when we outsourced to Ruan, prior to that, it was all state employees. The state did, over the since 87 or before when they had liquor stores, those were all state employees. So 2 years ago, we pivoted to an entity through a competitive bid process that can meet the needs of retailers, but to ensure that the state would retain the profitability, as Governor Branstad said, which is keep the wholesale tier. I don't know if Doug realizes in his world, but the wholesaler makes the money. And when you talk about in our world, that's a big deal in regards to lowering risk, because in distribution you have risk. So Ruan has been a wonderful partner, and it's allowed us to save over $120,000 in fiscal year 20 with our partnership with Ruan, and that is direct hard costs for the taxpayers of this state. As Governor Reynolds says, we want to be ensured after we come out of COVID, and I'll show you the map, that we can assist in economic recovery by bringing forward ideas on how we can help these small businesses and these models that were impacted with the shutdowns and or additional measures to limit their business. And clearly the on-premise community was impacted greatly. So with that, we're out in Ankeny. I will not go through all of our different things, but I want you to understand that I had the opportunity, with the support of Governor Branstad and Governor Reynolds, to make major changes so that we can be an effective, efficient organization in both how we regulate, how we license, and how we make money, which is the distribution of spirits. So I want to share with you a few thoughts on this, and then I'll open it up for some questions. So at this time, in the remarks, I want to hit 2 points. We, in fiscal year 20, we sold over $367 million in alcoholic liquor. It's a lot of vodka, a lot of bourbon. In addition to that, that was an 8.2% increase over the previous fiscal year, which was a record year. So since my tenure there, we've had to grow and adapt to increased volume of sales that took kind of away a little bit from the wine sales. But wine is fairly static as far as marginal growth, But in spirits, it's been incremental growth of well over 6 to 8% a year. In addition to that, we reverted to the state's general fund $144 million to the state's general fund that can be used for all of you for your benefit in both education and other expenditure priorities of the legislature. We are one of the largest sources of non-discretionary revenue from taxes because many of you have to pay income taxes. But in regards to spirit, beer, and wine, those are decisions made by consumers. And then ultimately from that, those taxes implied. Now, to put this in perspective, the liquor was $133 million is what we reverted in spirit tax. And then also, when you look at wine tax and beer tax, those range from 15 million, because the beer tax, when I quote the large amount, the beer tax is just swept into the general fund. That does not come through our agency. Wine tax does come through. So on beer tax, that went into the general fund. It's about $15 to $16 million. And on wine tax, it's ranging anywhere from $15.5 to $16 million. So you can see that spirits is $85 million more on average. And so we're tracking all of that. So it's a substantial increase in reference to revenue for the general fund. We also, over the last 6 or 7 years, have increased our regulatory compliance initiatives. In addition to that, we also issued in fiscal year 20 16,928 licenses. And in addition to that, special events, which are your 2-day license, 5-day, you have the art fair, anything that's a special event, basically that has increased tremendously over the last 5 years. The number of special events that engage the selling of alcohol, they have to have a permit and they come through ABD. So with that, I want to go to our COVID-19 timeline, Brenda. So I wanted to share with you, and this is something I won't hit, but I have a few key dates, and what did we do as an agency to support Governor Reynolds in regards to the proclamations, and we partnered, of course, with the Department of Inspections and Appeals. March 8th of last year was the first confirmed cases of COVID-19. The governor and the legislature then adjourned on March 16th, and then on March 17th, Governor Reynolds issued the first proclamation, which incorporated within the proclamation various rules and requirements regarding the hospitality industry. And those entities in regards to allowing them to then, at that point, do carryout of liquor, carryout of beer and wine. Now, wine and beer can be carried out if you have a certain permit, but in essence, it changed the rules. It allowed those who are going to be impacted, if they wanted to continue to operate their business, to sell to go with the hamburger and fries, a 6-pack of beer, 2 bottles of wine, or a couple bottles of black velvet. Oh, and by the way, you can do a cocktail with it. So as we move forward in time, there was a liberation or a liberalization of the types of things that can happen to help those businesses have some type of cash flow in reference to food to go. And that would be applying to anyone who had a license that would be able to, so it was expanded. And then finally, when the legislature came back, they put in the statute cocktails to go. So we now have in the statute, which Iowa was one of the very first states, that basically put in statute the ability for Class C, or the hospitality, those who are bars and restaurants, to sell to go indefinitely cocktails to go, which, as we know, margaritas. So that helped certain businesses that sell Mexican food, but in essence, margaritas was hot. In addition to that, gin and tonic. But the problem with it, the ice melts. So this has to be something that we had to weigh in on with the Department of Public Safety, because you have open container laws in this state. So you can walk in, order something to go, but it has to be sealed. So we were very involved in providing the guidance that if this happens in partnership with DOT and the feds, that we do not impact our highway funds. And I'm highlighting that because the role of our agency is to provide advice and counsel to both the governor and the legislature to ensure that we can be advocating public health, public safety, and also we have to regulate that. So after that came into play, Cocktails to Go, we did a massive educational initiative. In addition to that, as you all know, June 10th, the Iowa State Fair announced cancellation. So within our timeline that we're doing at ABD, and the point that I want to make is during the reason that we developed a timeline is because we're also viewing this as a case study. Many of you know that when times are tough, people allege people drink. Well, our figures show it. So on March 15th, we started tracking our sales in reference to COVID-19, moving forward on whether or not there would be increased consumption. And what I can tell you, and the annual report will show it, in addition, is yes. Our sales, our average sales each month and each month since March have exceeded 15% over a prior record year. Does that mean people are drinking more? We're trying to measure velocity, and all I can say is that we are really selling a lot of spirits to grocery stores and to big box. So to today, people are still buying more spirits, and beer and taxes are coming in, and I think as he shared with me, we will be able to provide information to the legislature and to the governor in the next week or two that validates that there has been increased consumption of beer and wine. And we are the regulatory entity that provides that information. So during COVID, we were very involved in regulating and education first, but out of that we did 2,800 and some inspections. In addition to that, we only filed 45 hearing complaints. What that means is that we would file a complaint that they were not in compliance, and then we would work with that entity to either settle or issue a $1,000 fine, or in some cases suspend their license and have them shut down for 5 or 6 days. Now, this was mostly during the summer up at Okoboji, and clearly there's been issues at Court Avenue. So we work with local law enforcement, we also work with local officials, and we also go to hotspots. So in essence, I can say that the legislature, as I reported, is 99.9% of all of our licensees are doing the right thing. As in anything in life, there's always those outliers, and we are there to engage. So with that, would like to go to some nuggets here, Brenda. So I'd like to, so that's our, and again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but I want you all to know that any information that we provided will be available. We also have a website, but in essence, this is how much we license, but generally we brought in 17 million. Of course, there's costs, but that's 10 years ago, that was about 8 million. Brenda? The 395 million represents all sales of tax, which incorporates also beer. Now, when I quoted you the reversion of 133 million, the state statute requires that any bottle of spirits, 7% of that goes to substance abuse. So 17 million went to the legislature. That's earmarked towards substance abuse. And then the rest of that is used for general fund expenditures and all kinds of initiatives. So 17.6 million, I'm sorry, that's license fees. So where does the money go? That's a history of our sales. I apologize if I'm not very organized here, but if you keep going, Brenda, where the profits go. So, as I said, substance abuse, and I apologize, is $9.4 million. So $9.4 million goes to substance abuse. Go to the next slide. This is our revenue of our statement of gallons sold. So last year, sales were 367 million. Gallons was 6 billion on spirits, and that's a lot of spirits. So in essence, before I open it up for any questions, what I wanted to convey to you is that we have a lot of information that is very detailed to provide to the legislature and to the governor and to businesses across the state, statistical information so that we can track trends, and also as we prepare for the future, we can use this also as a case study. So what I want to leave you with is that as you engage, if you have any questions, if you're in the business, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I have a team back in Ankeny of over 65 employees who are very good at what they do. And also, if you also are in the business or you're looking to get into the alcoholic beverages business, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Our purpose is also to educate. And also our purpose is to help people be successful. So we work a lot with individual businesses, associations, and others. And so, Doug, if you ever need my advice or anything, don't hesitate to give me a call. And if we're not doing our job and you're having a problem with bureaucracy with our team, don't hesitate to reach out and call me and we will correct that. We're here to serve business, and we're also to ensure that when we're serving the public, we're also protecting health and safety in regards to where if there are outliers, we have the proper network and connections to make what is deemed to be the appropriate self-correction. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Are we still on time? Okay? Okay. So I'm happy.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. My name is, pardon me, my name is Skeet Wooten. And actually, I have two questions. Do you do background checks on people like Doug? So, yeah, that's what I was thinking. But anyway, no, seriously, is there a sliding scale of the tax that is placed on spirits based on the wholesale value and then the retail value?
So here's how the tax structure is set, and I appreciate that question because that was something that I wanted to get to. So on beer, it's 19 cents a gallon, so we call it a gallonage tax. So on beer, it's a gallonage tax of 19 cents. That's like a keg, which is like that. So that's 19 cents. On wine is $1.75 a gallon, which is the same type. It's a little less than a keg, but it's $1.75 for the gallonage tax, and that's one of the highest in the country. And I think, but our beer tax is one of the lowest in the country, and spirits is a 50% markup. So the legislature, when they flipped to go to be the wholesaler of record, there was a lot, I'm sure there was extensive conversations. How much should we tax spirits, because we're selling the retail tier? We want the retailers to have enough margin that they want to sell a 7.5 or something for $3.75, but in essence, spirits is a 50% markup. We call it a markup. Under the statute, I have to average a 50% markup on all spirits sold in a fiscal year. So if we have 300 million in sales, 150 million is the markup. But at the end of the day, I have that discretion. The challenge for the administrators prior to me and today is we don't have systems to run an investment desk to say for this spirit we're going to go 35% with Smirnoff, but for Kettle One we're going to make that a 60 for 65 so we can average 50. So the way we do is we mark everything up 50% on the spirit. What I have suggested informally, because there is a conversation kind of ongoing, is that we should be looking at the tax structure of both beer, wine, and spirits and see what can we do to get to the net, which is the general fund. But there has not been any conversations within the policymaking authorities, but I do know that the wine tax has been talked about by people that we have. Why is it so high? And we are a very high state, both in wine tax and spirits. And it's challenging on the borders. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks so much. My name's Chris Anderson. I fully anticipated Skeet Wooten was going to channel his inner Foster Brooks when he got up here. He didn't. As I tried to recruit one of my favorite restaurants down in Austin, Texas, to actually open up here, there was a term I'd never heard of before, and that's dram law.
Yes.
And they decided instead of here, they were going to go to Omaha, because Nebraska is, I think, one of only a handful of states that don't have dram laws. Can you explain what the dram laws are and how that obviously can impact how businesses run?
Yes.
Thank
So-
you.
So, under the statute, if you're going to be a restaurant or anybody that's going to sell alcoholic beverages on premise, you have to have insurance, which is called dram shop. Now, there was a tragic accident back in 2000 or 2001, and I see the former Commissioner David Ullman, I think you were with the insurance division, but I apologize, but, oh, okay, sorry, yes. So, yes. So, dram shop is basically requires on-premise licensees that they have to have insurance in case there's a tragic accident if it's deemed that they sold a bottle of wine or consumption in which you created a drunk driving or some type of a casualty. So, in our state, our dram shop laws we did do a study in partnership with the insurance division about 6 years ago. It is an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think the current insurance commissioner has addressed that, and we are working more with insurance companies to create better rates for dram shop. And so it's a requirement under statute that you have to have this type of special insurance in regards to be considered of good financial standing with us. So if you don't have dram shop, we can suspend your license like right now. So we get notifications that somebody's insurance lapsed, and then we will suspend their license until they get the proper insurance. But it is a requirement, and I do know that the pricing of dram shop has been a big issue since 2012, and the insurance industry has been working to address that and others in regards to the types of the pricing of dram shop, because it can be very, very expensive. Does that answer your, hopefully that gets to the, thank you.
Well, you remember me, but for out there, Randy Worth. I think you told me before that when you were transferring from state employees to Ruan, the majority of the state employees Ruan hired, so they weren't out of a job. Is my memory correct? But how many employees do you have in the warehouse, and what's kind of the timeline between when My Favorite Grocery Store orders and what's the process, and how many days or minutes or whatever until they get it?
We made the strategic decision to put out an RFP and ultimately awarded that RFP. When we worked with Ruan, we negotiated they would bring forward any state employee that would be currently employed at the state of Iowa, because there's also, we wanted to be sure that those employees could have a safe landing. So they hired all the warehouse workers and all the drivers, and there was about 18 of them. So what I mean by that, there was about 10 drivers, but we had like 8 temp drivers because it was hard to find drivers to drive. So they took about 24 of those employees, but they had to meet their qualifications of employment, which is a background check and some other things. So out of the 24, they brought in 22. Some of those people that we had, like, were warehouse workers, because there's like 26 of them. They went into other jobs and went other places, but ultimately we wanted to ensure that any employee who would be impacted could have a first hire by Ruan, and many of them are still there, and some of them are promoted, and the drivers got a $16,000 bump in salary because of the demand, because the state has a threshold on warehouse drivers, which is a CDL, which is a Class A CDL. So that was a big benefit for the drivers. The warehouse workers kind of come in at the same salary, and Ruan does have a good benefit package too. In regards to the hiring of those people, when people place an order, even when we had the state model, which was our state employees, we deliver that order within 24 to 36 hours. So we're getting better, but it used to be 48 hours. So Ruan, with the resources, we are able to deliver next day, or for sure within 36 to 48 hours. So the 2-day deal is if there's an overnight, like if they're up in Elkader or they're down in Red Oak. So it's a route, but I can tell you we're shortening that, but there are many deliveries made within 24 hours.
Yes, thank you for your program. I feel so much better tonight when I had my margarita than I did
Yes.
the one last week.
That's good.
But my question is, I know historically Iowa kind of followed the Utah model. Are there any other states that are using similar to what these states are doing today?
Thank you. So as he asked, Iowa is a controlled state. What does that mean? We control the distribution of spirits. So there are 17 states like Iowa, which is called controlled. Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin is called a licensed state, which means those who are shipped in spirits in Nebraska, Illinois, they are licensed to be a wholesaler of spirits. So if I would flip to a licensed state, you would have wholesalers who would have the same authority as we as a state. In Canada, they're all controlled states. In Europe, they're all controlled states. In United States, it's about 33, 34, but no, 33, because there's 17. So, but also there's a county called Montgomery County. So there's actually 16 states, and then there's Montgomery County, Maryland, that is a controlled county. So even though there are other states out there, there are controlled counties. So when I talk about, in general, 17 states have this, 16 states, one county, but that doesn't mean that other states don't have some variance in regards to the limitation of spirits. Canada, controlled. Europe, controlled. Even Russia is controlled as far as they control the distribution and collection of taxes. So I don't want to compare us to them, but at the end of the day, it is it's been a very successful model. And the reason that it was successful, as I learned this, was when the legislature pivoted to rid the liquor stores and let retail do what they do best, marketing, and allow wholesalers of beer and wine. Also, the suppliers of the major suppliers, Diageo, Sazerac. Sazerac is the largest American-based supplier in the world, and they are like Sazerac Rye, Blanton's. They have like 250 brands, Nicoloi Vodka. So Sazerac and Diageo, Bacardi, Beam Suntory, which is owned by Japan. But the point is, they like our model because they can market to retailers and they can ship, but they can go out and market, and they're not having to figure out who to pay the tax to because they're paying the tax to the state. The other benefit of a controlled wholesale model, we are the best model, controlled wholesale, is that we can collect the tax on the spot, which means when all of that inventory, and I showed Randy, we have almost $200+ million of inventory out at Ankeny, but we don't have to pay for that. Iowa's called a bailment state, which is awesome. You have in a business in which you don't have to pay for your inventory, but when I sell it to Doug, I get the money and then I pay the suppliers. So when we talk about millions and millions of dollars with this controlled model, there is no tax validation because when we get beer tax and wine tax, we have to go out and we have to audit them to determine if they've properly paid the correct tax. Did they over or under? But with spirits, we are the facilitator and the collector of that tax when it's shipped in by the suppliers, but we don't have to buy the inventory. But when we sell it, we get our money in 48 hours, and then we pay the suppliers twice a month, and they love it. So I hope that answered your question to some degree, but any other questions?
Doug Saltzgaver, I do have a question.
Yes.
Could you explain why I can have a importing license for wine, a distribution license for wine, but I cannot sell retail? Hopefully that'll squash some people coming up to me later and saying, hey, can you get me a good deal on 6 cases of such and such wine?
Yes. So Doug has asked a question regarding Tight House, which is called the three-tier system. So when Prohibition went away back in 1934, there was what was created was called the Tight House, which is called 3 tiers. So Tight House is an old term that goes back in reference to where the ills where the manufacturer, we'll just say Budweiser, would both be the manufacturer, they also would be the wholesaler of that supply, and then they would pick and choose the retailers or the bars or the saloons and where their beer would go, and they would not allow that saloon to sell any other beer but Budweiser. So when Prohibition went away, they wanted to create what is called three-tier, which is if you are a manufacturer, you cannot have any direct influence or indirect influence on the retailer, as well as the wholesalers. So Doug has a license that gives him the privilege to do certain privileges, but does not give him a privilege to retail, because then he's moving into the retail tier. However, Iowa over the years has blended the three-tier system. So like a brew pub can both manufacture their beer, they can sell their beer on the premise, and as a brew pub, they also cannot sell that beer to a Hy-Vee. They have to use a wholesaler of record. So Doug, to your specific question, it's not granted under your license because there's a conflict with you being a retailer but also a wholesaler. So like Dahl Distributing. Dahl is a wholesaler of all the brands that they acquire, but they cannot ultimately sell out of their shop Budweiser directly, as they have to go through a retailer. So tight house laws are very complicated, and the legislature has addressed that. So we had a major owner of a major retailer who had a winery in Italy. And they're a retailer but they can't have an ownership interest in a winery. They can't be the owner. So the legislature created some exceptions to that. And so anything that is a conflict with tight house, the legislature can grant some special privileges to allow them to have a business that is totally separate from Iowa. Like they couldn't have had a winery in Mars. But the point is, what is the nexus to something in Italy to Iowa? But that's tight house, because if you are a manufacturer, you cannot have anything to do in the retail tier. I hope that makes sense. And that's why we did a study. So the legislature asked us to do a study on tight house, and we provided that information because Iowa has always operated under the tight house laws or the three-tier systems. But the legislature over the years has liberalized that, has expanded that because of the different business models as well. Hope that makes sense on a complicated topic.
Thank you, Steve, for being with us today and sharing such an interesting, informative, and intoxicating presentation. And we are donating the book today, Tell Me Why There Is Night and Day, to the Downtown School Library in your honor. You'd probably like to know that when I call our sales rep to see if I can get a case of certain wine that we like, she won't bring it right to me. She will call a retailer that we do a lot of business with, say, Doug wants a case of this, and I have to pay them for it. So she won't give me a bottle for quality control or a sample or anything. So I think we're following the rules pretty tightly there. Thank you all for being with us here today, whether in person or out there in cyberspace. Upcoming speakers. We have on February 4th, Capital City Fruit. Christian Comito, apologize for that, CEO, and Brent Addison, Marketing Director. On February 11th, TBA. Isn't that the airline that went out of business 15? Okay. All right. TWA, that was it. And on February 18th, our own Matt Unger from DMARC is going to speak with us, tell us some exciting things that he's been going through. Again, thank you all for being here with us today at your Rotary Club of Des Moines. And I must disclose my how I feel about whiskey speech was an actual speech given in 1954 by a Mississippi legislator named Noah Soggy Sweat III. I couldn't make this up if I tried, but that was an actual speech given. And as always, please remember to leave something behind in the coming week, a kind word to someone about Rotary. Hopefully they can become a potential member, or maybe leave behind an empty wine bottle with that little sticker on it that says University Distributors. With that, we are adjourned.